All right, friends, I hate to say this to you, but nobody is coming to save your business. Not the government, not Fannie Mae if you're an appraiser, or the regulators, certainly not the trade groups, not the AMC that promised you all the volume or the market when it finally turns. Nobody. And in the next 20 minutes, I'm going to convince you that this might just be the best news you've heard all year. If, say, you're watching your fees flatten out or watching one client quietly become most of your volume and sales revenue, maybe waiting for the day that this industry or that industry or whatever industry you work in finally swings back in your favor, well, you're exactly in the right place. Because in this video, I'm going to hand you 6 rules pulled straight out of emergency response and survival training. And I'm going to show you exactly how each one of these maps onto your business that you might be running right now. So you can stop waiting on rescue that essentially was never dispatched and start running your own. Now stay with me all the way to rule 6, because the first 5 are going to make some of you want to go handle everything yourself, alone, teeth gritted, the standard pull yourself up by your bootstraps mindset. But rule 6 is the one that stops that instinct from wrecking you. I've watched people take the first 5 without the 6th and end up in worse shape than they were before they started. And at the very end, I'm going to give you 3 questions and then 1 number. I'm going to call it your runway number. It's the most honest number in your business, and most appraisers specifically, and maybe most agents, most lenders, never once sat down and calculated. You'll have yours before this video is over, I guarantee. And by the way, if we haven't met yet, my name is Blaine, and I'm glad you're here. You know, there's a sentence that might be the most comforting sentence in the English language, and I'm here to tell you that, unfortunately, that sentence is a lie. It's not a lie on purpose. Nobody's trying to lie to you when they say it, but it's a lie, and it's a dangerous one. Let me paint the picture. Imagine you're in your home and you hear somebody breaking in, or maybe somebody slips and they go down hard, they get injured. Somebody, of course, grabs a phone, they call for help, and the voice on the other end of the line says the one thing that every one of us has been waiting our whole lives to hear without ever really knowing that we were waiting for it. And the line is this: help is on the way. Now, watch what happens in that room when those words are said, because this is the part that gets kind of dangerous. Everybody exhales, everybody relaxes a bit, everybody takes a step back, the shoulders drop and the chest drops, and the thing that was prior a full-blown emergency just a few seconds ago turns into something of a waiting room and also a waiting game, because the so-called professionals have been notified, people have been called, and the professionals are coming. That's what everybody thinks. The emergency didn't change, the crime didn't change, the injury and the threats didn't change, the person injured on the floor, of course, didn't change. The only thing that changed is that one person said a sentence, and everybody in that room went from responder, somebody who could take care of the problem, to spectator in a second and a half. And here's what few people know or expect. Average emergency response times in this country run somewhere between 7 and 14 minutes, depending on where you're located, longer if you're in rural areas. Brain damage from oxygen loss starts somewhere around 4 to 6 minutes, depending on the situation. So you can go ahead and do the math, do the subtraction. Getting the cops or first responders to show up in minutes when you need them in seconds is a very real thing. We see stories all the time about this, and there's no shade on them. It's the job that they do. It's just the reality of relying on somebody else to take care of you, and more importantly, to rescue you in an emergency. Now, the outcome of those calls gets decided by the people standing in that room when the threat is occurring or when the injury happens, whether they know it or not. Help is on the way, for sure. Help is absolutely on the way. It's just not on the way in the time most people need it. So that exhale, that relaxing effect, the dropping of the shoulders from just hearing the words "help is on the way" is what this whole video is about, my friends. That half step back, the moment we hand off our own emergency and our survival to somebody who isn't there yet, and then stand around feeling like we did something, like we accomplished something. But here's what they teach you early in emergency response training, and they teach it hard and often, and it's this: you are the first responder on the scene of your own emergency. You're not the second, you're not the third, you're the first, because you were there before anybody else. You're there right now, and the window that matters closes long before anybody else, the so-called first responders, shows up. The ones we're calling the professionals, the ones who save people for a living, they aren't the real first responders. They're the second responders. They've always been the second responders, regardless of their title as first responder. Somebody has to hold the line, protect, keep the threat away, or help the injured person until the so-called second responders get there. And that somebody is whoever's standing closest to the problem. The real first responder, which is you. It's always been you. And in your business, it's also you. It's always been you. You just may have heard somebody say, help is on the way, a long time ago, and you've been standing in the waiting room ever since. You outsourced your own rescue and survival to somebody who's never coming. No, most emergencies in business are not the loud kind. Nobody hears a splash in the water or a blaring siren or glass breaking. There's just a slow, quiet realization somewhere around maybe year 3 or 5 or 8. Maybe it's year 15 for you, that all of a sudden you're further from the shore than you intended to be when you started floating out onto the proverbial lake on your back. But of course, now you're tired and the current has been carrying you out this whole time. And one of the things I see almost every day, and I see industry in every industry, professionals do when things start to get challenging, is they wait. They wait for somebody else to notice, say, how unfair things are. They wait for the pendulum to swing back. In the appraisal industry specifically, which I coach and work in and have started several businesses in. It's waiting for the appraisal management companies to get what's coming to them, waiting for the market to correct so that people who came in, say, during the good years, wash out. That's a rescue culture, my friends. Everybody's got a flare gun and an air horn, but very few have an actual plan. So answer this one out loud right now, wherever you're sitting and wherever you're watching or listening to this. Who or what are you secretly waiting on to fix your specific situation? Give them a name and then answer, how long have you been waiting? If it's been, say, a year, friends, that's a rough year. If it's been 5 or 10, that isn't waiting anymore. That's become a way of life for you. And it's the one you intentionally chose deliberately, even if it was through your own inaction and your own failure to self-rescue. And I want to tell you how I learned this because I didn't learn it from a book and I didn't learn it gracefully. We all have moments in our lives that end up being engraved on our souls and having what I'll call a profound impact. One of those moments for me, I'm going to be a little bit vulnerable for you here, happened to me when I was in the third grade. 2 times each year in my elementary school, we had what was affectionately called Hot Dog Day. And as you can probably imagine, it was the day that everyone got to eat, well, hot dogs. And for some crazy reason, we all thought it was one of the best, the most special days ever, all because of this silly hot dog. It was just something different. Nevertheless, Hot Dog Day was in full swing, and I remember eating my hot dog with all my friends, sitting in those long tables in the gymnasium, when suddenly I found myself in distress. I had apparently taken too big of a bite of this hot dog, and I found myself choking on it. I swallowed it too quickly. And not only was I choking, but I was also in full panic mode, but for all the wrong reasons. And to this day, I still don't understand or know why I did what I did. But in that moment, I was so embarrassed that I was choking that I ran out of the auditorium where everybody ate lunch every day, and I ran into my empty classroom. I don't know what I was thinking or why I left the only area on the planet that day and in that moment where anybody who could possibly save me would have been sitting or standing, but I did. And it won't be the last time, by the way, that I do something stupid in my life. Trust me on that one. But in that moment, I'm panicking because I can't, of course, breathe. So I run into the boys' bathroom of my classroom. Again, not sure why. Then something shifted in my mind because I did suddenly realize, and I remember the moment I realized in that very moment that I would not be able to make it all the way back out of the bathroom to the classroom, through the hallway, and then back out to the auditorium, the lunchroom, to find somebody to save me. So I instinctively started to thrust my clenched fists into my stomach to dislodge the hot dog, the blockage. Now, I don't think at that age we had learned the Heimlich maneuver yet, but it's quite possible. Either way, somehow I knew that I had to force this blockage out of me if I wanted to live, if I was going to survive. Now, thankfully, as the sound of my voice and my face here is attesting to, I somehow managed to unchoke myself and live to do stupid things many times after that. But that moment had a profound impact on me. And I didn't know it at the time, but not only because I still cut my food into very tiny bites ever since that day, but that moment also impressed upon me the sobering fact that often in our lives, whether because of our own stupid doing or not, some choice we made, nobody is coming to save you. And if you want to survive, you likely have to self-rescue. Yes, that really happened to me. No, I had no idea at the time that the idea of self-rescue was being imprinted into my little brain. It's only after 40 plus years of other fairly harrowing situations that I've put myself in that I've come to realize that it may have all started right there. Because I believe in that situation, it's one of the key moments that set me down this path of wanting to learn, say, martial arts and learn how to fight, protect myself, and how to be self-sufficient and study all things survival and self-rescue. It was like that experience of choking, and I thought I was almost dying. And having it happen that early in my life flipped a little switch in my brain that said, Blaine, anything can happen, and you better be ready to do something about it. Now, when I think back over the themes and the threads that connect all of the experiences since that time, I can see very clearly a very clear inquisitiveness about risk taking, about skill building, about having adventures, but also knowing how to take care of myself if I found myself in a bad situation. And I've had to use those many times over the last 4 decades. Now, fast forward 20 years or so. And by then I had taken several first responder courses, some outdoor survival training, ski patrol training. I worked with military and law enforcement agencies teaching defensive tactics. I've traveled all around the world having some wild adventures and had essentially gathered an internal library, if you will, of beliefs, as well as a bunch of skills and tactics that would give me and those around me the greatest chance of survival should things go what we often call pear-shaped, and I find myself in a potential rescue scenario. Now, what I've also come to realize over the decades is just how much of that kind of training and mindset applies to normal daily life, to our relationships, and of course, to business, which has been a big focus of my life for the last 30 plus years. Now, the idea that there will always be somebody there to save you if you get into trouble, of course, is a comforting one. We all feel better if we think that somebody is out there ready to put us first. But unfortunately, I'm here to tell you it's just not a realistic one. The person always closest to the problem, the person with the most information, the person with the most to lose and often the most insight, and the person who can act right this second is you. Now, this video is not about me or my companies. My story doesn't really matter unless it does something for you and yours. So I want to zoom out a little bit. Looking back at that whole stretch and at hundreds of, if not thousands of coaching conversations since, There are 6 rules that I wish somebody had put in front of me very early. Every one of them comes out of survival and emergency response. You may know some of these, but every single one of these maps on to your business. Now, before I give you the first one, I have to give you the phrase that runs underneath all of these, because without this phrase, this whole video is just some guy telling you to work harder and be ready to take care of yourself and self-rescue. The phrase is this: I don't have to, I get to. In first responder culture, in military culture, in law enforcement culture, in every corner of the world where people do genuinely hard things and they do them on purpose, there's a phrase that separates the people who make it from the people who break. And it's, I don't have to, I get to. I don't have to go out in that. I don't have to carry this heavy pack. I get to. I don't have to do the thing that nobody else wants to do. I get to. I don't have to go work out today. I get to. And I'm sure you get it at this point. I know how that sounds the first time. It sounds like one of those successory type posters that you'd read in a break room in a corporate setting, but I want you to listen to what's actually happening in the language, because language is the operating system that your brain runs on. It's how we make sense of the world around us. I have to is the language of victim. Every time you say it, you announce to the world that something outside of you is in control and you're just following along. You're just complying. I have to raise my fees. I have to make those sales calls. I have to sweep the floor or fire that client. I have to work out today. Every one of those sentences describes a person being pushed, a person with no personal agency or responsibility over their own life. I get to is the language of an owner. It's radical responsibility. And here's the part I want to emphasize about all of this. The overwhelming majority of human beings who ever lived did not get to build anything of their own. They worked in someone else's field. They worked on someone else's schedule for someone else's benefit, and they died having never once had a say in the direction of their own days. Most of our parents likely had to work for somebody else in someone else's company or factory or corporation, helping to pay somebody else's bills. That's just the historical norm. It's the water almost everyone who ever lived was swimming in. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. If that's you, if that's your parents or your grandparents, there's no shame in having to work for somebody else. I typically coach entrepreneurs and business owners, so my message is primarily intended to land with them and to ensure that they have a mindset of, I get to. Nevertheless, whatever your employment situation, the mindset of ownership, regardless of who owns the company, is one that says, I get to do this instead of I have to do this. You get to build something. You get to decide, for those entrepreneurs watching this, what to charge, who you work for, who you say no to, what you learn, and what's left when you're gone. Nobody's making you do any of it. You have personal agency. You have responsibility. And more importantly, you have choice. So when you catch yourself saying, you have to do the hard thing, hear what you're actually saying. You're resenting the very privilege that many of you have spent your whole life trying to get. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to do the hard things, my friend. You get to. Now carry this question for the rest of this video. What's the one thing you keep saying you have to do that you've been avoiding for months or maybe years? You know what it is. It came to mind probably before I even finished the sentence. But now turn things around. Now say it again with I get to in front of it. And if nothing moves for you, I want you to be honest about what that means, because it probably means that it's not that you're unable, you're just unwilling. And those are very different problems to have. So 6 rules from emergency response and survival. Here we go. Rule number 1. No one is coming. It's the first thing we talked about at the start of the video. Nobody is coming to save you. And everything else that we're going to talk about in this video stacks on top of that one. So if you turn off the podcast, if you're listening via the podcast, or you turn off the video if you're watching via YouTube, I hope you at least remember this thing. No one is coming to save you. Hope is not a strategy and rescue is not a plan. Every other rule we're going to talk about after this fails if part of you is still holding out for some kind of rescue externally from somewhere else or someone else. You can learn every technique, every skill in the world, but if half of your attention, half of your brain power, half of your heart is out there scanning the proverbial shore for a rescuer, you'll never fully commit to saving yourself. No, radical responsibility, my friends, means you take the position all the way down to your very core, that you're 100% responsible for where you are and more importantly, where you're going. Not 50%, not 30%, not, well, the market did play a role, Blaine, or I wasn't born with the same gifts. No, friends, you're responsible for all of it. Now, is it literally true that you're responsible for everything? Of course not. The market is real. Maybe you weren't born with the same gifts as somebody else. For the appraisers that I coach and who might be listening, the AMCs are real. Things happen that you didn't cause and maybe didn't deserve. But responsibility isn't about who caused something to happen. Responsibility is about who's going to respond to it. That's what the word literally means when you break it apart. Responsibility, your ability to respond. And you're the only one on the scene with any responsibility. Again, hope is not a plan and rescue isn't a strategy. Stop scanning the horizon for someone to come save you and just accept that success and failure, 2 sides of the same coin, are yours to own and yours alone to own. So that's rule number 1. Nobody is coming to save you. Just accept it. Rule number 2, don't become the second victim. Day one, hour one of any kind of first responder training and emergency response training is one of the more important rules to learn. It's called scene safety. You'll hear it all the time. If any of you are ski patrollers or have done any outdoor wilderness survival training, you hear this term all the time. Scene safety, scene safety. Scene safety comes first, even before the victim or the patient, before the person screaming, before the thing that's on fire. The math is simple and it's unforgiving because it makes complete sense. If you rush headlong into danger and you go down, well, now there are two patients, two victims, only this time one of them is you, and you've helped nobody. Your bravery and your big heart actively now made the scenario or the situation worse. And I see this with entrepreneurs. They do it every day. Somebody's business starts sliding and the response is to burn themselves to the studs trying to save the business. More hours, more reports if you're an appraiser, more calls, less sleep, lower fees to keep volume up and sell more, skipping the workout, the vacation, the kids' event, the doctor's appointment, and the holiday, all because the business needs saving right now. What happens? 12 months later, the business is in the same spot or worse, but now the owner is exhausted, resentful, a shell of themselves, and of course, out of gas. And now there's two patients and a business with a hollowed out owner, and it has no rescuer at all. Friends, you can't rescue a drowning business by drowning yourself. Your attitude and your energy is the only rescue equipment on the scene. Everything else is optional. Don't become the second victim. Rule number 3 from emergency response, rescue, and survival training. It's called learn the Umbles. In cold weather medicine, there's a thing called the Umbles. It's one of the best diagnostic tools that I have ever come across thus far. When somebody is, say, going hypothermic, they don't announce it. They start to stumble and their speech starts to mumble and their hands start to fumble with, say, zippers and buckles on backpacks. And they, of course, begin to grumble. They get irritable and negative and short with everybody around them. And here's the important part of the Umbles or this particular lesson. The person experiencing the Umbles is always the last to know or the last to recognize. Everybody else around them can see it. It happens similarly when somebody has a stroke. The person going through it can't figure out what's going on. The thing that's failing is the very thing that they would need in order to notice that it's failing, which is, of course, all of their faculties. Sometimes your business has the Umbles. The stumbles might be your fees. They didn't collapse completely. They just slowly maybe crept downward while your expenses started moving upward. Maybe a little concession here or there, a discount there, a tech expense or an upload charge and a fee that you maybe haven't raised in a couple of years out of fear that you would lose a client. Now, the mumbles, that's how you talk about your own life and your work. You're used to explain what you do and why it matters. Now you kind of trail off. Maybe you apologize for your fees before anybody even objects to it. You complain about how things have changed and how it was back in the old days. We all know people like this. We've all heard it. And then there's the fumbles. The fumbles are simple things getting hard. Tasks that took a few hours now take 7. The pipeline that used to be full now has kind of a hollow echo when you scream into it. And then the final is the grumbles. They're the loudest tell of all. The grumbles are how much energy you pour into things that you simply can't control. The Facebook forums, the venting, the daily 2 hours spent on how fair all of this stuff is. Friends, if you want to see an industry with hypothermia, go read the comments on any industry social media forum. Now, here's the reality. Nobody's attacking you. It's not the government's fault or the AMC's fault or this other industry attacking you or any individual. You're simply drifting. You're still in have to mode instead of get to mode. Comfort is the current in the water, my friends. It doesn't feel like danger when you're in it. And that's exactly what makes it dangerous. When you're in the water, the current doesn't hurt. You don't feel yourself moving because everything else around you is moving at the same speed. You feel fine. Right up until the moment when you look up and you realize, no, you're nowhere near where you meant to be. And the sound you're hearing up ahead is the waterfall. So friends, learn to spot the Umbles in your life and in your business before somebody else has to. Rule number 4, you fall to the level of your training. Nobody rises to the occasion. You fall to the level of how you've been trained. Maybe you've heard this saying, we don't rise to the level of our expectations, we fall to the level of our training. This quote is often attributed to a somewhat famous Greek poet and soldier, Archilochus. And the more recent example, very similar, is one from James Clear in the book Atomic Habits, where Clear says, we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems. But whoever said it best and however it's used doesn't really matter. Both of them are kind of hard to swallow. One, because they're true, but also because the story we all tell ourselves is that when the moment comes, we are going to be different. Something inside of us will switch on and will rise up and become the person that the moment requires. It's a beautiful story, and it's in almost every movie you've ever seen. It's the hero's journey. But friends, it's a lie. And the people who train for real emergencies, real survival situations, know it's a lie, which is why they drill and train endlessly for things that will probably never happen. The statistical likelihood is very small, but they train anyway. That's why a martial artist, of which I'm one, practices, say, self-defense moves over and over and over for something, again, that is statistically unlikely and less probable to actually happen. And it's why pro athletes train endlessly to hone their craft and their skills. Under real stress, your creativity drops through the floor. Your fine motor skills all but disappear. Your ability to think through a problem in real time, it basically shuts down. It's gone. And what's left is what you drilled in training. That's the entire emergency toolkit, which means your response to the next big shift in your business or in any industry really has already been decided. It was decided months or years ago by what you built or didn't build. So for my appraisers out there, my coaching students, maybe you're a realtor, maybe you're a lender. It's whether you have relationships outside of certain areas that you're used to working in. For appraisers, it's do you have relationships outside of just lender work? It's whether or not you have a pipeline or a phone number, whether you have reserves in your bank account. We talk often in the coaching academy about your survival account or your emergency account, building up to 12 to 18 months of expenses. Whether you've ever practiced saying a higher number for your fee out loud without having your voice crack or having you kind of verbally or tonally apologize for it. Whether or not you're diversified outside of the interest rate dependent lending side of the appraisal business. Friends, if you've never done it before, you will not do it in the middle of an emergency. That's the point. It's not a character flaw. It's not meant to denigrate you in any way. It's simply how human beings work under stress. In an emergency, you're going to lose most of your faculties. Remember those umbles? It happens when adrenaline is high, when stress is high. And I've seen it and experienced it hundreds of times over decades of working in and teaching defensive tactics to military and law enforcement agencies. There's a rule of thumb about how people behave in a sudden crisis. I've seen it firsthand. Roughly 10% of people act decisively and correctly. Roughly 80% of people, you know what they do, fight, flight, or freeze. They freeze, they go passive, and they wait to be told what to do if they are even capable of taking instructions or direction in an emergency. And then that leaves 10%. Roughly 10% of people do exactly the wrong thing. They thrash, they scream, and they often take other people down with them. And everybody watching or listening to this, they think they're in the first 10. Everybody. And that's the whole problem with the first 10. If you want to know how you'll respond in an emergency when it comes to your business, just go watch the tape. The last time something blew up in your business, did you stop and think? Or did you thrash? Did you fall on the ground? The market had already told you which 10% you're in if that's how you responded. If you did nothing, now you know. You just might not have fully accepted it may have been the wrong 10% that you were in. You will fall to the level of your training. So train for success. Train for survival. Train for the opportunities and the threats. And for connecting the dots in the market in order to move accurately and accurately forecast which way things are moving, not only for your protection, but also to spot opportunities when everyone else around you might be panicking. That's rule 4. Rule 5. It's a simple word. It's called triage, and essentially says you can't save everything. This is one of the coldest rules in emergency medicine. It's one of the it's one that really a bunch of industries probably need the most, because triage is the decision that nobody wants to make. When there are more victims or more patients than there are resources, somebody has to walk the scene and decide who gets attention, who waits, and who gets nothing, essentially a toe tag. And that last category is real. Some will just not, they're too far gone. They will not be able to be saved. And it's the hardest thing in that job. And here's why they do it anyway, because refusing to make that decision doesn't save anybody. It means you spread yourself so thin trying to save everything and everybody that you save nothing and nobody. Triage essentially means sorting and prioritizing people and problems and maybe tasks based on the urgency, the severity, and the available resources. Entrepreneurs often fail to triage. I see it every day, and they end up trying to save all the wrong things. You keep the client who pays the least but complains the most. Why? Because it's still revenue. Blaine, I can't give them up. They actually send me business. You keep the service line or the product that eats 40% of your week and your time, but it produces 8 or 9% of your income. Why? Because you've always done that. You keep the appraisal management company that's ground your fee down for 4 years and treated you like shit, because what if the other work dries up? I got to keep them around, Blaine. And again, for the appraisers watching, I'm not telling you to fire your AMC work. Most of you can't afford it. And both of us know that. No, I'm telling you to look at that scene and decide what gets saved on purpose and intentionally and deliberately by default. Some of that work is keeping the lights on, and of course it deserves the resources. Some of it is a patient that you've been performing CPR on for 4 years while the person who could actually be saved is lying 20 feet away untouched. Maybe that's a client in your business or a product line. Friends, trying to save every client, every product line or service line, and every old rule and process is precisely how you lose the business, sometimes lose people and talent, and often yourself in the process. It feels heartless, I know, but it's actually the opposite. Because the first responder, the medic who triages appropriately, saves more people than the one who won't, to the one who wants to save everybody. And it happens every single time. You have to learn to triage who and what get the resources in your business, which includes your time and your attention. Everything else, friends, gets a toe tag. That's rule number 5. Learn to triage. Rule number 6. Here's the one I told you might feel better than the first 5. And it's this. Self-rescue, which is what we've been talking about this whole episode, is not solo rescue. Again, it's the one I told you to stay for, and here's why it matters more than the other 5 combined. Some of you are going to hear this. You're going to watch this, and you're going to take this entire video as permission to stop, to give up. Or you're going to hear no one is coming and you're going to think, well, that's right. I don't need anybody. I'll do it all myself. I always have. I hear that one all the time. It's ridiculous. And you'll turn a message about ownership and radical responsibility into a justification for the exact thing that's been holding you back for 20 years. Friends, self-rescue does not mean solo rescue. You don't do it all on your own. Those are two different things, and confusing those things will kill you and your business. Go look at how actual rescuers and first responders operate and train. They almost always train and work, that's right, in teams. They call for backup constantly. Going in alone when you didn't have to gets you a conversation with your boss or your superior afterwards, because that's not necessarily courage, it's often ego. And ego in an emergency is almost always a liability. It's a danger. Friends, self-rescue means you own the outcome. It does not mean you refuse the rope and the life vest when it's thrown to you. If somebody throws you a rope, you grab the freaking rope. Owning a rescue means you decide, you act, you move, and you're accountable for where you end up. That's what it means, taking responsibility. It doesn't mean you turn down help out of pride while you go under. The lone wolf thing isn't strength. It isn't macho. It isn't alpha. It's rule 2 waiting to happen, if you remember what that one is. Rule 2 is don't become the second victim. The business owner with no team and no coach and no peer group, nobody to call, no positive community that uplifts them. That person isn't independent. That's one bad month from being the second victim on their own scene. And again, I see it all the time. We have dozens of members in the Appraiser Increase Academy who were lone wolves for far too long. And within months of joining that community or one of our other coaching programs, they realized the folly of going at everything alone and turned everything around in a short period of time, because you often simply don't know what you don't know. The most independent, most successful people that I've ever met or worked with have teams around them, which isn't a coincidence. It's the whole point. Friends, the market isn't going to save you. Markets do what markets do. They always have. It doesn't have intent. It isn't out to get you. It was doing what it does long before you got here, and it will be doing it long after you and I are gone. Big corporations are going to behave like big corporations do. AMCs are going to do what AMCs do. The technology is going to keep you improving, whether you approve of it or not. AI is going to keep advancing and improving, whether you and I approve of it or not. None of those things is a variable. You are the variable. You are the only thing in this entire equation that can actually change. And you have spent years studying the thing you can't. So here's the question. And it's the one that made a few of my coaching students genuinely angry with me before they came back and, of course, thanked me. What are you blaming right now that is actually just your own failure to act? I'll say it again. What are you blaming right now? What are you giving your agency and authority away to that's actually just your own failure to take action, to self-rescue? And I know it's hard to hear. I know some of you are in a truck or a car right now arguing with me out loud, and good. It means it hits something. But stay with me one more minute, because here's the flip side. And this is the actual message of this whole thing. If nobody is coming to save you, then nobody can stop you either. If there's no cavalry, then there's also no permission required. There's no approval that you need. There's no gatekeeper, no committee, no dispatcher somewhere deciding whose call gets priority and where you sit in their queue. Nobody out there decides when it's your turn. You, my friends, are the first responder. You always were. Nobody else is on the scene, which means the only question left is, what are you doing the next 4 minutes, 4 days, or 4 weeks? And that question has been sitting there unanswered, waiting on you this entire time, regardless of what it is you want to do. That, my friends, is freedom. It just happens to be the kind of freedom that comes with a bill attached to it. There's a price. And the bill is that you have to do the hard things. You're going to be forced to make some tough decisions. You're going to be forced to move your body and pick up heavy things. You're going to be forced to have tough conversations with people that you've probably been putting off for far too long. And remember, you don't have to do them. You get to. Now, I promised you at the beginning 3 questions and 1 number. And here they are on paper, not in your head. Because in your head, you're going to cheat and you know it. You and I both know it. Write it down. Number 1, if your biggest client disappeared tomorrow, how many days until you're in real trouble? If your biggest client disappears, not until it gets uncomfortable. That's not the question. Until it's a real problem, until you're making decisions out of fear instead of out of strategy in a position of strength. I want you to write that number down. How many days? Because that's your runway number. And it's the most honest number in your business. Now, if it's a small number, I hate to say this, friends, you guys hate me when I say this, but you don't have a business. You have an arrangement, a convenient arrangement, and arrangements end. That's question number 1. Number 2, what's the one have to that you can turn into a get to this week? What have you been telling yourself that you have to do, and you probably hate it? We call it slogging through things. What are the things you have to slog through? But what have you been telling yourself that you have to, that you could mentally turn into a get to and see how it feels? You already know what it is. It popped it 15 minutes ago when we talked about it. You kind of knew what it was. And I want you to put a day next to it and do it this week, not this quarter. Because rule 4 says you fall to the level of your training. And training starts with 1 rep, 1 step, 1 small action. And the small action today is writing down. What is your one have to that you can turn into a get to? Number 3, where are you drifting on the, let's call it the comfortable current, using the water analogy, but potentially heading for the waterfall? Name it, give it a name it specifically. Not I hear this in coaching all the time. I need to grow, Blaine. I kind of want to scale. No, friends, that's not a thing. Be specific. You have to be very specific. When I say name it, you have to get specific. My fee for X hasn't moved since Y. Very specific. Client Z is 60% of my volume, and you told me I can't have a client that's more than 20% of my volume. That's specific. I haven't asked for new work in 3 years. That's specific. Because the answer to those questions are the work to be done. That's the gap. That's where the work and the triage needs to be focused. Human beings are built to look for the bigger, the stronger, the better equipped somebody. And we've been built that way a lot longer than we've had phones to call those people on. You've been raised on the myth that your safety, your protection, and your rescue is somebody else's responsibility and somebody else's job. And friends, I'm here to tell you, you've been lied to. It's always been your responsibility. And now you have the tools and the mindset to accept the mission. That's it. That's the whole thing. Everything else is just minor details. Maybe your industry is like the appraisal industry. Somebody told you help was on the way. A regulation change, a market turn, a headline, maybe a lawsuit, a correction, somebody finally noticing that your fees are shrinking. And then you exhaled, you relaxed, and you've been swimming in that same spot for a couple years now, checking the shore for a rescuer, listening for a siren that was never dispatched. Friends, strength is not waiting for rescue. Strength is self-rescue. It's you on the scene of your own emergency, being the real first responder that you already are, because you've been the first responder this entire time. You just hadn't accepted the job. So your job now is to accept it. And when it's hard, and it will be hard, remember, you don't have to do any of it. You get to. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What or who have you been waiting on to come save you in your industry or your business? Are there some other rules that you think should be updated or added to the next version? Add them below, because I read every comment and I do my best to respond to all of them. Until next time, my friends, do more, be more, live more, give more. See you on the next one.